Better put the word out. Get ready for the nerd out. Better put specs on. Better break necks on. I cut handsome checks for my expansion sets. They call me Obi.
What's going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creator Christian Moran. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, so want to just talk a little bit about comics. So I was watching a video actually of some people previewing comics, and one of the books that they previewed a couple weeks ago was Osiris Path. And I was like, I've got to read that. It sounded right up my alley. So we're going to talk about the book a little bit and just kind of how you got into it. But I want to know first, how did you get into comic creating?
Well, one of my friends, Corey Kalman, had become friends with who's a guy who's now my friend too, Brockton McKenney, who had been working in comics for a while. He worked a lot with Action Lab. He wrote a book called M Theory, and actually ended up writing for Mad Magazine for a while and everything. And they did a book together called Amerikarate, which is kind of an 80s action comedy thing. And it's very funny, very cool. You should check it out if you're interested.
I doing a little bit of research, I saw that your name was mentioned with that a little bit. So I was like, I got to check this out. It was on Comixology. So if you guys are watching this and it sounds up your alley, check it out for sure.
It's hilarious.
Yes.
And they asked me to help with issue 4. So if you think issue 4, if you read that and you think issue 4 is the best, and if you think issue 4 is the worst, again, you know, it's me one or the other.
So that's cool. So so you got connected with them. I know you do comics, you do filmmaking. If you follow you on Instagram, you do baking. So you do a little bit of just everything.
I wrote a couple books also. I've written 2 histories on the Walt Disney Company, and I did wrote a science fiction novel called Echo, the Augment. So
how'd you get into doing the history of Disney then? Like, what drew you into that?
Well, you know, you've followed me on Instagram a little bit. Mm-hmm. I'm fancy myself a futurist, and the work that I do with my foundation is definitely with my family's foundation is very technologically futurist oriented, and was always interested in Walt Disney, the man. And then I ended up discovering that the last project he was working on in his life before he died was the Epcot Project. And not Epcot as a theme park, as we're aware of. And that actually stands for Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. So the whole reason Walt Disney bought the land in Florida to build Disney World wasn't to build a bunch of theme parks and hotels. He actually wanted to build a futuristic city there that would have 0 unemployment, 0 homelessness, all connected by electrically powered mass transit, all that type of stuff. And when I saw that, I was like, wow. And he wanted to do this in the late 60s, you know, and we still don't have anything on that level today. So when I discovered that, I kind of wanted to create something about him as a futurist and all the different technologies that he created and implemented, and for everything from robotics to monorail transportation and everything he did in animation. So I did both a book and a documentary. They're both called Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow. Yeah. And you can find the film on YouTube. You can find the book on Amazon if you're interested.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll make sure I put, if any of this stuff, because like we said, we're talking a lot of what you got going on. So if people are watching and something clicks with them, I'll make sure I have the links below. So you guys are watching, you can click on right there in the description. So man, that's cool to hear that kind of that transition of future, because we talked a little bit. We talked about, you know, Disney briefly there before we got on air. We talked about we're both repping Ohio State, and that you went to Ohio State for a little bit before you moved out west.
That's right.
And you said you studied. What'd you study at Ohio State?
My major at Ohio State was archaeology before I moved out west and went to film school. So my first documentary I made kind of combined the two. It's about a substance called Ayahuasca, which some of you may have heard of. It's a tea that's a massive hallucinogen, but the indigenous people that have created it for thousands of years have used it as a medicine. So did a documentary about that. But yeah, when I was at Ohio State, I was majoring in archaeology. It's always been a passion of mine. I was fortunate to go to, spend some time in Peru and in Egypt and a number of places where there's a lot of really cool, ancient history, and got to experience those kind of things. So
that's cool. And like, as I'm talking to you, I'm seeing more and more of how we started to get to the creation of one of the comic books where I discovered you, of Osiris Path, right? Like, we're seeing a lot of things that filter in. So, like I said, I picked that up. I was excited about getting into read that. I'd never heard of Behemoth Comics before, so let's talk then your comic book, Osiris Path. Tell, if people haven't gotten to hear about it, haven't read it yet, describe it a little bit. Yeah,
the elevator pitch is that it's Indiana Jones in space, right? And people have been saying it's Indiana Jones meets 2001: A Space Odyssey. So I'm in the science fiction that I've written, I'm interested in kind of hard science fiction in the sense that, realistic science fiction. So what I wanted to do with this was something that was really out there, but also done as realistic as possible. So like, if this was a real thing, what would it be like? So the idea is that it takes place in the early 1980s, and there's an archaeologist who is contacted by the Defense Department, and he's basically brought into this secret space program, and he's launched up into, on an abandoned Saturn V rocket and sent up into space, and is basically shown that there are all these artifacts and massive structures built throughout our solar system on the moon and Mars and everything. And so the Defense Department has brought him up as an archaeologist to try and figure out what these structures are, who put them there, what they're trying to communicate, while simultaneously trying to learn these things, while a secondary kind of black magic cult is trying to destroy these things so that they can't figure it out. So there's a lot going on, but there's ceremonial magic and ancient history and space technology and all kinds of crazy stuff that shouldn't be going on together, but that are happening in this story.
So if you weren't sold off the first pitch there of Indiana Jones in space, that's a really good, I think that's a really good description of what's going on without giving any away spoilers. So I've read the first 2 issues.
Okay, I see you picked up issue 2. I appreciate that.
I got issue 2 today. So I was able to dig into that and read that before I hopped on here. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard issue 1 is going to a second printing. Is that correct?
That's what we've been told. That's correct. So that was pretty cool to find
awesome.
out. Yeah.
So so that's cool. That's gotta be cool as a creator, like that you're like, oh, people like their stuff so much that we gotta put more of it out.
Exactly. Especially, Behemoth has only put out a few things so far, but they're doing an amazing job with the stories that they're choosing to put out, and the artists and the teams they're working with. And so we're just thankful to be a part of that growing company, and to have one of their first projects that's really getting out there and people are interested in is pretty cool to be a part of.
That's cool. So how did you guys get connected with Behemoth then? Behemoth.
Well, it was interesting because when we finished 3 issues of Osiris Path and started shopping it around, actually when we finished issue 1, we actually signed a deal with Amigo Comics, who were based out of Spain, but they released in the United States. Okay. And oddly enough, due to some timing issues, our contract with Amigo lapsed. So we went shopping around and we ended up with Behemoth and found out that Behemoth had ended up buying Amigo. So regardless, we would have ended up with them anyway.
No
so, what. But it was a funny path that ended up, all roads led back to them.
So you said you guys created 3 issues. Is it a self-contained story? Are you guys looking to expand off of that? Is that
the idea is that these first 3 issues are kind of the first arc.
Okay.
But I kind of see it not going on indefinitely. I see it as 4 3-issue arcs. So
Okay.
if all goes well, hopefully there would be 12 total issues to tell this particular story from front to back. But I think the universe is interesting enough that if we were fortunate enough, we could spin all kinds of things out.
Right. So you talked about how you kind of got into creating. Some of the writers on it were the same ones that kind of helped bring you into. How was it like working with with the team that now this is basically your, I know you kind of said you were one issue, but this really your second project, it seems like, together in the comic world. How's that work for you guys as a creative team then?
It's very fun. It depends on if you have a good team, right? And if you guys or guys and gals can work well together. So it's with Corey and Brockton, it's very fun because whether we used to do these things in the same room together, but now because of everything going on, we're doing it over Zoom and the phone and stuff. But that energy is still there. But it's when you respect one another and you respect each other enough for what you're saying, but you also respect each other enough that if someone doesn't like an idea, you can just say, well, no, I think maybe this, and no one's kind of hurt by it. You're just kind of spitballing and going with things. So luckily the three of us have that kind of a relationship where all the ideas being tossed out are good. And one of the things that's good for me working with the two of them is I think they veer more towards comedy. They're both very funny comedy writers, and I tend to veer more towards a serious story, but I can be comedic and they can be serious. So, with Amerikarate, I can get into that zone, that kind of surreal comedy and everything. And they can also get into the more hyper realism that's in Osiris Path. But the benefit for me of having them on this is that when those moments of levity or comedy are needed, they know exactly when to toss that in and everything. Right. So, yeah.
That's cool. So, because you, I feel like it would be hard, and I'm not a creator, but you have 3 different writers basically coming together to put one story. So, if you don't mind, how does that kind of process a little bit more? How do you dig into that? Does someone kind of lay out the groundwork and then people spitball ideas, or is it kind of from the start?
Right. So on Amerikarate, that was created by Corey and Brockton, right? So They're the leads on it. I was kind of there to help them in whatever way that I could and everything. So they came up with the general outlines of the stories and everything. And again, particularly episode 4, which I was particularly involved with. So I can come in there and then say, it would be cool if this happened or this was said, and we just kind of flesh out the story. We need them to get from A to B and end up at C. How do those things connect? And then I can kind of help with that. It's the same thing while writing Osiris Path. I take the lead on that, and I kind of say, this is what the general idea is, and we're going to get from A to B to C. And then the 3 of us will kind of sit down and bang, 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 and, just figure it out and block it out at that point.
That's cool. So how do you guys then, I'm assuming, come about with the artists that you guys choose or decide to work with? Because if you've read both those series, the art style is completely different, obviously, because they think the stories call for that. So how do you come about what artists you are going to bring into the fold and create with?
Well, Devin Roth, who did the art for Amerikarate, he's actually done a lot of work. I think he did Future Worm on TBS and everything. He's done a lot of very big character art design work for, your television animation, Adult Swim-esque stuff. And Corey and I had, over the years being out in LA, had kind of gotten into the pop culture art scene with Mondo and Mondo Tees and everything like that, and had gotten to know a lot of those artists like Tom Whalen and Ollie Moss and various folks. And through that, I know Corey became, involved with Devin, and then they decided to, felt that work would be great. For Osiris Path with Walt. It was a bit different because we decided to, with that, when we first had the first issue complete, obviously at that point Brockton was the veteran of the comic book industry, and Brockton said, "Just Christian, tell me 10 artists in the industry that you think would be cool to work with, or that you kind of see their style as fitting." So I listed 10 artists, and he looked at them and he said, "Well, I know one of these guys personally," and that was Justin Greenwood, who of course has done Stumptown and a bunch of other things. You know, Stumptown, the television show right now, is based on his comic. And so we spoke to Justin, and he was of course super slammed with everything, but he said he was being nice, and he was like, "Send it over, you know, I'll look at it." So he looked at it, and we weren't expecting anything, but he said, "Look, you know, I'm really busy right now, but I dig the story. I could do covers and I could do breakdowns for this." So Justin Greenwood actually did the breakdowns for the first 2 issues.
Okay.
And beyond that, then we had to find someone to flesh that out. Right. So that's when we went looking for artists, and the person who we ultimately found is a South African artist named Walt Barna, who, if you've seen, you know, obviously you've seen this, but if anyone watching has seen either issue, his artwork is beautiful, and he does such a great job with colors and doing that kind of retro futuristic 80s technology, and the character design is beautiful. So he really was able to bring to life everything kind of how we saw it in our heads and everything. So with that combination of Justin Greenwood, you know, doing the breakdowns, and then Walt fleshing all that out, I think we got something really special.
Yeah, it is. It's a beautiful, the artwork, it blends so well. Like, and that's when I was reading that first episode, I was sucked into the comic right away, and I was like, I need more. So it was, archaeology in space, Indiana Jones. Come on, what more do you want? Like,
how much more did you need?
Every single kid in our era, you know, growing up, we wanted to be Indiana Jones.
Exactly.
And then if you didn't want to be Indiana Jones, you wanted to be in space. So merge those two together, and it's a great.
Exactly. What did you think? If I'm used to being the person doing the interviews. So can I ask, between issue 1 and issue 2, did you dig issue 2? Because it kind of is a departure from what issue 1 was.
It is, and I wasn't expecting the departure that it went for. But I think it really got into the other realm that you were talking about a little bit more, you know, the magical element that you kind of said there. But I think you see a little bit of you still see some of the archaeologists, the characters, you know, you're seeing them grow just in those 2 short issues a little bit, but it's still his personality as he's growing. And it gets a lot of, I feel like, Indiana Jones kind of like, I'm gonna still do what I think I want to do here, even though, like, no, don't do this. And he's like,
yeah.
Like, so I thought it was a really cool blend to see that. Like you said, it kind of, I think the first issue really set up the story well of kind of where you're going. And then, I mean, you go from the moon to Mars. You're like, okay, here we go. And I thought, like, introducing what you did with the archaeology and stuff features on that first, it was able to make that jump into that realm a little bit more easier transition in that second issue, because you had that basis, and then you could kind of explore that a little bit more than you were able to in the first issue, which I thought was a really fun ride for that. So
thank you, I appreciate it.
And I'm like, okay, now I want to know where this is going and where it's going to take, because I think you also get to you're starting to see the relationships between the main, you know, character and the female character, and and so I'm just excited to see, you know, how they blend together, everyone that you're, you know, where you're going with the story route. And then I got really excited when you said that there's more story out there that you guys are looking at, because I know when I was looking at Behemoth's website, it was like the conclusion on issue 3. I was like, no! I was like, don't tell me it's only 3 issues.
Right, yeah. No, I can tell you it's a pseudo conclusion. It's a, you know, it's a Back to the Future Part 2 conclusion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. So you have then, so you have this kind of first story arc, is it kind of then like a wait and see before you guys move forward with further stories with this, or are you guys already in the process of creating some stuff with this?
We know what the stories are.
Okay.
It's just a matter of if Behemoth gives us the green light,
Okay.
we'll go ahead and make more. So
Nice.
yeah, I mean, we definitely know what the story is and
So,
where it's heading and everything.
yeah, so you have the vision for the 12 where you want to go,
Right.
of say, hey, we want to break it up into like a 4-movie kind of
Exactly.
which is cool. I think you're seeing that a lot more in comics. You're seeing a lot more of they're being written into some degree with like a movie feel aspect to it. And you're even seeing it with, you've said it and I caught on to it even today, you've said episodes more often than issues.
Yeah.
And you're seeing that a lot more because I think it's inundating into the culture that people are associating with. Like you go to Netflix, you're like, oh, this is a 10 episode series that I can get into, or a,
Exactly. And I mean, that's, that really is you being, as big a comic book fan as you are, I'm sure we all know the state of the industry right now. Most of the money being made in the comic book industry is through those licensing deals, trying to get it into a television show or a movie or whatever it might be. So we absolutely, entered into this with that goal in mind. So
yeah, and I think it's smart, like, because like you said, you did in the hopes of kind of getting it optioned, and you have that set up of like, okay, well, let's just create it as episodes, and it speaks a language. I feel like people still will get issues, but but like if you're trying to just skip that middleman a little bit, it makes sense to dig into that realm of pop culture. So nice. Couple. I don't want to keep you forever, but is there anything else comic related that you're kind of working on, or that you have thoughts of that you'd like to work on coming up? Or are you just right now in the midst of Osiris Path?
Well, yeah, we're in the midst of Osiris Path, but luckily it's been doing well enough that Behemoth as a growing company, again, that's kind of what I said, getting on the ground floor with them has been a lot of fun and very cool, because as they're growing, they're doing a lot of one of their paths of growth looking at is licensing video games to become comic books. And so we've been having the opportunity, I don't know if I can get into specific things, but we've had the opportunity to pitch on several very well-known video games, and we're waiting to hear back. Again, in that those pitches are myself, Corey, and Brock.
Okay.
And,
so the whole creative team's coming back again to make those.
Everything. So one of them, again, is very without giving too much away, it's the 90s, was a very big video game in the 90s with a very macho character that would lend itself to the kind of American Karate-esque type humor. And the other one that we're pitching is a modern video game that's a bit more somber and kind of espionage focused and stuff.
So, well, and I appreciate you sharing that, and being able to give a little bit. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe there was a story that Behemoth is promoting in here that is in Osiris Path 1, the second that is connected to video games, and or is it not?
I did not. It might be. I didn't.
Okay.
I actually have not picked up the second issue yet. So,
okay.
But
I was talking in the first issue.
Oh, was it in issue 1? Okay, yeah.
It was that. It was like the Miami hotline.
Okay, yeah. I'm not 100% certain on that, to be honest with you, but it very well could be, because I know that they're going pretty hard licensing, trying to get those video games like. And the cool thing about that is that a lot of the artists that are working with Behemoth are video game design artists from those companies. So the cool thing will be, as those licenses start getting in, oftentimes they will be designed by the people who actually design the games themselves, which would be cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So like you said, you got a lot on the docket, it seems like, in the comic realm. You got anything else coming out, maybe not in the comic realm, that, you want to talk about a little bit real quick, or you want to share a plug as we close up?
Right. Sure. Thank you. Yeah. So if you're a college football fan, and specifically an Ohio State football fan, I have a new web series out called Born a Buckeye that each episode basically follows an event or an incident in the history of Ohio State football, and I try to edit it in kind of a pseudo music video-esque fashion with kind of a synthwave 80s synth music, and it's very stylized. It's not a typical sports documentary, even if you're not into sports. I tried to imbue it with something else going on. So the first episode is about a man named Archie Griffin, who was the only person to ever win 2 Heisman trophies. And I was able to speak with Mr. Griffin about the story of how he came to win that second Heisman trophy, which was very cool. And the second episode, which will be coming out next week, is about the biggest comeback in the history of Ohio State football, which was a 31-point come-from-behind victory in 1989. I was able to speak to Greg Fry, the quarterback who did that, and John Cooper, who was the head coach at the time. So this will be an ongoing series, and there's a lot of it. And on top of that, I actually am finishing up a micro documentary on, if you're anyone into David Bowie, his kind of soul period from 1974 to 1976, which is a very interesting period in his career.
That's awesome. So yeah, I mean, you, like I said from the get-go, you have so many things going on right now. So I am grateful that you took some time to just talk comics.
I'm grateful for you having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So where can people, obviously I'll have your stuff in the YouTube link here, but where can people find you, follow along, just see what you're doing? What's the best place for them to connect?
Probably the 2 best places would be, I have a website, christianmoran.com, but that's in the midst of a refab. Okay. So that's not going to be tip top really until a few months from now. But I'm on Instagram, christian.m.moran, and I'm on there every day. And then my YouTube channel is CM Films, and you'll know it by the backwards CM logo. That's me. And on the CM Films channel, you'll find my documentaries about ayahuasca, documentaries about futurism, about Walt Disney, Born a Buckeye, the stuff that I'm doing with my family's Futurist Foundation, all kinds of stuff. So
awesome. Well, that's awesome. I'll have links for everyone in there that's watching to go to it. Just want to thank you so much again for the time. And for all you guys that are watching, I hope you can find some time to pick up these books if you can find them, because they're selling like hotcakes. So if you've missed the boat on issue 1, hopefully you can hop on if they do the second printing. Issue 2 just dropped this week, if you're watching it this week. So hop on those, be on the lookout. Make sure you guys are following Christian on all the Instagram, and just so you can know what's going on. And I hope you can find some time to curl up and read a book and nerd out.